I just hope I am not the adult in this situation because
Wait,
I can't.
you
No.
expect me to be the adult? Wait a minute. Hold on. No.
Just here,
No.
here.
Hello.
Hello. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, my name's Krista. I use they, them pronouns. I am an educator, future social worker, in love with all things Black and LGBT, and I have a slight obsession with mugs. Welcome.
Hey, welcome. In good company.
Mm-hmm.
Hello. Hey y'all, I'm Shanéa Thomas, Dr. Shanéa Thomas in some spaces. Shanéa here is perfectly fine. I use he and she pronouns. When all else fails, please use doctor. It was paid for, so please make sure you use it. I am also all things all things education. I'm a social worker by trade, so I ride high for my social workers, but I'm also an educator. I do trainings around LGBTQ life and population and mental health. I am a grief and a death doula, so I also help people cross on the other side and also help people process their own grief in some way, shape, or form. And I am also a person that openly identifies as a Black, queer, non binary person, very hard on the non binary. And I am very happy to join Krista on this platform to talk about a subject that we don't necessarily see us get reflected in mainstream or in daily life. And I'm actually going to leave it to you to talk about like why do you think this is important? What do you want to accomplish here? And what do you think we can grow here? Because I think that's always important.
Yeah, so we talked. So Dr. Thomas and I have been talking about this for like a year.
Has it? Wow.
Yeah, like a year, a little under a year. And one of the things we first talked about when I met Dr. Thomas was Dr. Thomas is one of the first people that I've seen doing the work that I want to do in terms of like really centering gender diversity and really centering Black LGBT experiences. And growing up, I did not have, the concept of chosen family, of language, of anything of that nature. And being in a space now where I see so many more people, so many more Black people, so many more Black gender diverse people, I'm like, oh, we've come so far, but I still feel like we're lacking in content about the lived experiences of being Black and non-binary. And that is partially a big motivator what brought me to this space today, because in this, world of podcasts, there's a lot of content out there that is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'll leave it there. Is interesting, and people have a lot of opinions without holding the identities that they have opinions about. And I was like, you know what? Why not? Share the lived experiences of being Black and non-binary with another person who identifies similarly from the background of education and social work, where we can be like, actually, like, here's some resources, and not just this is what I think on this Tuesday. It's like, no, like I think this, and also here's all
We
this
can
other
back a little bit
stuff.
up, but
Yeah,
right.
like we education. So like here are my references, in APA format. But yeah,
Because
that's
they be
how.
asking.
No, they do, and I have them. We have them. So that is how I find myself here. What about you?
I am always amazed when people reach out and they're like, "You're doing the thing that I want to do. How'd you do that?" And I'm like, How did you even find me?" So I'm not even remotely aware about how much I'm online, what works out there, whatever. I literally just, I'm doing this because I didn't see myself. And that's how I got into social work and doing particularly trainings, is that I was seeing how bad my colleagues were treating the students that I was working with. And so I kind of did the thing where I became the person that I wanted to see. And so you reaching out was not only just like, oh, like somebody found me, but also like, yay, somebody out there is like me. Like, that's so cool. And I think conversations we have had have just been, yeah, not seeing a particular type of representation that is not necessarily feminine or not necessarily masculine, but like this beautiful like in between that we both like experience. And there's also not this goal to be either one of those two things, right?
No.
There's not like I'm me, so I don't really have a leaning to be more feminine. I can be. I don't have a leaning to be more masculine. I can be, but I think sitting where I am and almost forcing people to see me as such has been a journey. And I think this is a great platform to, even if we're just constantly talking to each other for weeks on end, I think that hopefully my dream is that somebody will find this and be like, yes, that's how I identify. That's how I see myself. Even if you are a person that identifies as cisgender or you're a binary trans person, like
Mhm.
I'm hoping some of the things that we are able to bring to this platform kind of almost not take away from the binariness, but I also want people to stretch their ideas of what it looks like when it doesn't have to exist at all.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes. So a great kind of like start is how do you
Mhm.
yourself like tell me a little bit about what non-binariness means to you.
Mhm.
And why non-binary, right? Because we also have all these other terms that people use. But like how did you get here and why that particular term works for you today?
Yeah. So, context and background. So, I'm originally from the South, specifically Florida.
Hmm.
And as folks know and can research and read, there is a disproportionate amount of Black LGBT people in the South in situations that are not great. And so I am grateful and have the privilege of growing up in a situation where I know that I wasn't in danger of any physical harm, but the emotional support was not there. I did not know, similar to you, I didn't see myself anywhere, but the fact that I didn't see myself anywhere was intentional because what I was allowed to consume, the content, the relationships, the friends I was allowed to have, the places I was allowed to go was heavily controlled. And so there wasn't even like an option for me to go find community that might understand my feelings. And so I knew from a very young age, I think I was 9, I was like, something, something, something. I didn't have the words, but something just felt different. And I remember my parents, my mom in particular, was very specific about, well, when you get older and marry this Black man, I was like, okay, sure. So that was kind of my first thought. And then as I got older, I had several family members question, like, well, are you gay? And I was like, that's not quite
Almost.
it. I was like, so close. And then I was 17 when I kind of invited the first person into my lived experience. Was a really good friend at the time. And what I told them was like, I don't like why it doesn't make sense for me to pick or like aim
Mm,
to be a specific thing. Like, why can't I just operate in what feels comfortable? And so that was how I knew how to describe it at the time. Since then, I've learned that that has come to mean non-binary, and so like I don't shy away from um, something just because it's supposed to be like a social norm, right? Like I've never understood that. Like, oh, men do this, women do this. I'm just like, what does that mean? Like,
hmm
can I just not do stuff that suits me? Also, when it came to dress, that was one of the first places that I got to experience like my expression or my presentation. That was one of the first places I got to be like, why are there gendered clothing sections? I don't understand this. Like, can I just, these pants over here fit and the shirt over here fits. Like, can I not just
hmm
wear those? And so for me, I, as opposed to any other term, non-binary just feels like I recognize that the world we live in most times, all the time, operates in a binary way. And sure, there are some moments where, based off my presentation, people will be like, oh, this woman, or this masculine person, this man, but that's never true for me. It's never true that like I identify as a woman or as a man.
Mm.
What is true is that I feel like I'm always just sliding up and down the gender spectrum, if that makes sense. And so that's how I got to non-binary. It took me some years to get there. It took me some years. But really it took me years to have the language. I already knew. It just took me years to have the language and years to find a community to where I felt safe enough and affirmed enough to be myself, because I was 9 and I was like, y'all are doing some real questionable stuff out here, and I don't know that this is gonna work for me. So that's how I got here.
You're like, I have some questions. Yes.
I had so many questions. I was always that kid that I would get like an instruction and I would be like, but why? That doesn't make sense. Like, why would I? Do we have to do that? Like,
right.
do I have to marry this man? Okay, all right.
Man.
This man. I was like, do I this man? I don't know that I want that to be my life.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be, but also like,
Is
no
it
thanks.
right? Yep. So yes. Yeah, I feel you about that. When you were talking, I was thinking about like I've been joking to myself. Like I feel like being non-binary sometimes is like woman minus.
Bruh.
Like it's like you got it, but you don't got it. It's like I get a lot of like, really? Are
Yeah.
you? You can be. Just put some makeup on. You know, it's just like no, or I'm just like no, and they're like, oh, well, you're one of those. You know, it's just not. It doesn't feel yes. For me, I am also from the South. My parents are from North Carolina and from Georgia. My dad's family eventually migrated to Delaware, which most, if not all of them, are there now. My mom's family is still in North Carolina. So I too did not get a lot of the information, particularly about queer folks, because first of all, my parents are not queer. Like I think that's something I also have to realize is that I have to forget that they're not going to understand because they are not queer people at all.
Not even
Through and through, very very heterosexual. And I also got, particularly, God rest her soul, from my grandmother, where she was very much just like, why are you laying in bed? You got to get up and take care of this man, or you got to find a boyfriend. I'm like, God, Grandma, I'm 12. Like, I just want to sleep in till 12 o'clock. That's really it. I don't want to do anything else. But she was very adamant about I needed to find a man. And even kind of growing in my career now, like I didn't really even get conversations around sexual health or HIV or anything like that. So a lot of the stuff that I learned is from being older in community now. And so I was always that kid that like had my shirt off. I always ran with the boys. I got a little certificate in first grade because I played sports with the boys. Like I played soccer with them. Like there was a certain level of like celebration around my maybe physicality. I was a really good athlete. I got the presidential award that people remember. Like, I don't even know if they do the presidential awards in physical fitness anymore, but I got the presidential award in fifth grade. Like, I was doing all the things. So I felt comfortable in those spaces because I wasn't seen as a girl. I could beat most of the boys in running. I could do most of the things, but there was always still, I could see a limitation of things that I couldn't do because I was a girl. I feel like I had a girlhood, like I did have a girlhood, like I, had plenty of like girlfriends that I was able to commune with, but I did definitely feel different from them. I wasn't necessarily seen chasing boys. Like I had a boyfriend, but I had a boyfriend because we exchanged stickers with each other. And I was like, well, sure, we can be together if you give me your sticker. And he's like, okay. And then that's what happened in second grade. So very transactional. And maybe I need to think about that because a lot of it is just like, you got something, I got something. Let's just make this work. And we made it work. So So that was very much early on. I think I got to DC when I started going to Howard back in 2004. So this is my 20th year in DC. Yes, I've been here a very long time. And here was when I started exploring my queerness. For one, I was away from my family. So I didn't really have people looking over my shoulder or wondering who I was dating or whatever. And I was able to have some space to be able to explore with other communities that were out here that were growing at the time. So whether it was the folks that I knew from Howard, whether it was like the places. It was BLSG was a group that I was a part of, the Black Lesbian Support Group, which some of those folks are still my friends today. And back in the day, we only really had gay, lesbian, and bisexual. And
Mm-hmm.
so bisexual, sure, because I was still partnering, particularly with cis men. But I didn't necessarily feel like I centered cis men in my relationship. So bisexual didn't always feel good to me.
Yeah.
I don't ever think I identified as straight, but I definitely, even in my relationships with cis men, I'm very masculine. I show up, in a very, particularly assertive way that maybe they're not used to, particularly with other cis women. So
We
that was
need to
always
pin that. We need to pin that for later.
yeah, but
Mm-hmm.
it's
Pin
just
that for
like
later.
I don't mind the men, but I'm gonna show up a particular way in this relationship, and we're
Mm-hmm.
gonna be very clear from the beginning about what that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so even now, like I have settled into non-binary as a term. It still to me doesn't feel great. Like I do like queer,
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like I'm not only queered in my gender, but also my sexuality and my politics and the way that I teach and the way that I show up and the way that I grieve and the way that I love. Like queerness is the basis for all that. I also feel like blackness is queerness, shout out
Mm-hmm.
to Patrick Johnson of just like, yeah, once I got that word, I was just like, yeah, just me even being existing is queerness. But I do hold non-binary because I have been in particularly trans spaces
Mm-hmm.
and I have not necessarily always felt welcome
Mm-hmm.
because of the lack of me being able to maybe settle in or identify or be a part of a particular binary.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think I'm even in my old age, about to be 42. Like I think I'm still wrestling
Okay.
with being trans. I don't know because I think when I learned about being transgender, that didn't include the experiences that I have now. But
Mm-hmm.
if somebody calls me trans or if somebody says like I'm part of the trans community, I won't say no, but I'll definitely be adamant about like, but I'm non-binary.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not seeking to transition to be a part of a identity. I'm not seeking to be a part of a particular gender expression. Like this is how I show up, and my showing up is challenging the environments that I'm in. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think some of it is still fluid for me, but I definitely rest in non-binary because when I show up in certain spaces, I'm not as welcome. In
Yeah.
some places, I understand, right? And I also understand that those are not spaces for me, which is why I'm appreciative of spaces like this.
Yeah.
And I've kind of run out of like, I need to force myself into spaces to be accepted. Like, I'm just not down for that anymore. So, yeah, long story short, like I've kind of just had to make this up as I've gone along. So.
Listen, I a long time ago had told someone if I'm going to do anything, I need people to be willing to make stuff up with me because just the amount of
Hmm.
stuff that I'm like, there is no whether there was or was not a precedent or was not space. Even if there was, I didn't have access to it growing up just because of how I grew up, and so I was like, look, I don't see what I need, so I'm gonna make this up because how else am I gonna get it? And I feel like that throughout like my career and my life has been a central theme. So when you said that, I was like, yeah, we just gonna make it up because we'll make it up.
We'll make it up. And I think a part of being non-binary for me too is also like, I'm gonna make it up. And if I get more information to where something needs to shift or change, I'm just gonna shift or change it. All right. Like, I feel like being non-binary is like constantly evolving. So it's just
Yes.
like, this is just the information I have
Mm-hmm.
today. But
Mm-hmm.
if I learn something new, or if my body feels different tomorrow, or if you just shift and change. Like, that's
Mm-hmm.
all it's got to be.
Yeah.
So, yeah, yeah.
Agreed.
Now, You are also an academic. How has being non-binary been a reward or challenge where you are, especially in social work land?
So I social work is an up and coming profession for me. I'm an MSW student in my advanced year. I'm almost done. I graduate next year. Praise. But before that, I got my master's in education in something that's called college student personnel. So that's basically the education of adolescents and young adults. And I've been doing that for a decade and some change.
Mm,
So I really came into my own in that space, especially in graduate school specifically, where you have dedicated time to just learn about the profession that you're going into and the people around you. And again, similarly, I was like, there's like, y'all don't have this stuff here. So like, I'm gonna make it up. So I remember the first time I came to, I've always experimented with like clothing in terms of like, I don't care what section it's from, but I very specifically remember I came into class in like a button down, pants, and like Oxfords. And I saw my professor do like a double take. It wasn't very long and it didn't make me feel uncomfortable, but like I saw him see me do something different. And that was the most myself I have felt, or at the time, that was the most myself I had felt in a really long time. So this is not to, shame or call out that particular professor because I love him and he knows who he is. But I definitely get those looks when I show up in terms of like clothing and presentation and dress. People are struggling with pronouns, and for the life of me, I don't understand. Like I get knowing somebody by a set of pronouns and having to adjust, but if you meet me and my pronouns have been the same the entire time and you just default to pronouns that I never gave you and you've never known me, I'm like, I understand that there is a reinforcement of binary pronouns. Like I understand that, but also like I never gave you those. Like you never had space. You never had space to use those pronouns for me. So that is a daily thing, and I cannot like zero exaggeration, like a daily thing, like as recent as yesterday.
mm,
Um, I think another one is I did a training last year for a group of faculty on creating space for LGBT learners. And one of the questions that I got, and mind you, super engaged, love doing trainings, great space. But one of the exercises we did was to use different sets of pronouns in sentences. And I kind of gave them like a guide of like how to use the pronouns in different sentences. And, they participated, they engaged. One of the faculty members was like, can we pick what the alternative pronouns are? So like everybody only has one set. Like why are there so many options? Like can we just decide as like a world that there's only one set of alternative pronouns? And I was like, so that's not how this works.
And how would we do that? Do we send out a
Yeah,
survey
I was just
monkey?
like,
Do,
we're
do
in
you
a
send an
section, a
email?
training session, so I gotta keep it together.
Oh, okay, I'm
But
sorry. I have questions.
yeah, no, I had many questions, but and then this person like jokingly like ha ha ha, and I was just like, no, you were serious though. Like I saw every bit of intention in your face, and so we just talked about how you know like you may come up with different pronouns, and that's not to be like you need to preemptively learn all the pronouns that exist, but like if you come up with a different set, the purpose of the training is to orient you to the fact that like there is more than what you've been told. There is space for more. And if you come up on something you're not familiar with, the person will be more than happy to be like, this is how you use them. This is how it works for me. This is how it shows up. But also don't like pick on people for having different sets of pronouns because that's just unnecessary and
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense. And so that is how I've kind of navigated the academic side. Now, being a student, similar things, reminding people of pronouns, getting misgendered every day. My favorite is the misgendering in emails when my pronouns are in the signature. That's my favorite one.
Come on now.
Yeah, that's my favorite. I'm like this one is easy. It's written.
Right there.
You could just type. So you you typed on purpose with your whole chest the wrong. Okay, got it.
Because at some point you did look at it and say, "Ooh, they them," and then you went back to the paragraph and you wrote
not that.
Not that. Yes.
Not that. So that has been an everyday, every week occurrence. I think as a student, in social work specifically, I will first say that there are the people, the professors, the administrators that are like, we're going to make sure the LGBT things are in here, and like we're going to support the people and like give you the space. But the space is small, and I don't think it's given the same consideration as other areas of diversity. And so as someone who knows that part of my goal in being in an MSW program and also part of my purpose in life is to be in community with LGBT folks, support LGBT folks, advocate with alongside LGBT folks, having more content in classes would be great. There are some people that always put it in there, so I'm appreciative of that. But it would just be nice to have more and more support. And so, again, making stuff up, I've just kind of sought out people as I've gone to presentations and things to be like, hey, you do this stuff. How did you get the information? Do you take interns? Do you take trainees? Like, whatever it is, I made it up and I did it myself. So, again, that theme continues to run through. So that has been my experience in social work as like a student.
Like all of these initiatives that we have, and people are still like, can't we just use the same old pronouns we've been using for 50
No.
years?
No, you can't. That's not how this works. It's not how.
How do we get a world consensus on pronouns? That's what I want to know. How do we get? Is that a Zoom call? Is that a Survey Monkey? Is that how? How do we all agree? And then when we agree, what about the people who don't agree? Like, what do we see? Again, inclusion is hurting us.
In my head, when this was said, I'm thinking, so everybody sends a delegate with like a list of 50 pronouns that they would like to submit, and then a delegate from each country, large or small, we just sit together and then hash out the top 10. Ooh. And then that's where we go. That's what came up in my head. But also I was like, okay, so like once we get to the top 10, how do we narrow down to one? Because several languages don't use pronouns. Several languages don't use pronouns. Also, several languages have like actual words in recognition of people who inhabit more than one gender. So I was like, I this is not going to work at some point. Like, just like language wise, we're not going to get there. But, I appreciate the engagement.
Yes, right. Great suggestion. And see, I'm petty, so I would have walked down that aisle with him. I would have been like, let's talk about this, right? Let's think about what are you really trying to say instead of just learning the pronouns that are right in front of you, right? You see how hard this is? Oh, my gosh. It's like, do people want to change? Like, do you want?
That's a separate podcast topic. I feel like we could talk about for like some hours, honestly.
Okay. Yes. Academia. For me, I've been in it most of my adult life. I started, like I said, I got to Howard in 2004 for my master's degree. Even when I was at Virginia Tech, I ran track. I was an athlete there, so I feel like I was tipped on coming out during that time. And so I definitely, like, again, I was an athlete, so I was always in like sweats or flip flops. Like it wasn't, and anytime that we dressed up, it was like for a ball. It was like a fraternity or sorority ball in some way, shape, or form. I had a boyfriend most of my college.
Mm-hmm.
I had a boyfriend most of my college, so like latter part of freshman year, all the way up until grad school, same boyfriend. Like, and he knew that I was queer-ish. And I think people I didn't really get a lot of recognition around my queerness then because I had a boyfriend. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that kind of canceled out any conversation. I think people just understood me to be a tomboy.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I got into grad school and I was really like, all right, let's hit the ground running with this. Um, I, as a person who went to Howard, did not necessarily have a great amount of support around even just being queer.
Mm-hmm.
I do remember a professor. I remember this professor that I had, and she had an Audre Lorde poster on her door. And I'm all about signaling, so I'm like, oh,
I found you.
I found you, a gay. You're right there. I'm coming. So I like go, go to her office, knock on the door, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, hi,
Mm-hmm.
just want to chat with you about your work. Hello. Do you need any help with your research? So I was that person. So
Uh-huh.
like, because I didn't see anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And then she wouldn't talk to me. She wouldn't talk to me. She
Now
wouldn't. She
wait
was just
a
like, I'm
minute.
having to. She wouldn't talk to me. I think I clocked her.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, I'm not here to be clocked. Right? Like, I'm not here to be clocked. I'm here to do my work. I'm here to concentrate on this. I also I believe she was Caribbean as well. So I think there was just
Mm-hmm.
a lot of
Right.
things that I didn't understand in coming to her. But I don't, and this is just making an assumption. I don't necessarily think that she was safe enough to be as out as I would have liked her to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt very alone. I remember having a class of mine where we were talking about referrals, and people were like, what happens if you get somebody on your case who's gay? And then the professor was like, well, then you just refer out. And I'm just sitting there like, oh, okay. At the time, I'm thinking like, if I needed services, where am I supposed to go? So this was just the structure of what I learned 20 years ago of just like you had to either keep it on the low, or if somebody didn't want to work with you, they didn't have to work with you, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
just a whole other level of discrimination. So a
Wow.
lot of my like I couldn't be as out as I wanted to. So um I don't think anybody taught me how to be out as a social worker. So, when people such as you come up and say, like, why do you use all your pronouns? I'm like, this is just how I know to do it because I'm making it up because nobody really taught me
Mm-hmm.
either safer ways or ways that I can show up and support to have. When I started working in academia, I used she, her pronouns when I started, but as I kind of went through kind of the journey around my gender identity, I started using he, she.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I would prefer not to use she at
Mm-hmm.
all. But I put the she in
Mm-hmm.
because people be sheing me. So I would rather put the she in
Mm-hmm.
so y'all don't be feeling bad and then I have to make you feel better about it. But I put the he there in the front so people know that that is the preference.
Mm-hmm.
No, I know when people feel uncomfortable when they go straight to the she. Even when I'm showing up like this,
Mm-hmm.
even when I show up in a suit, show up in sweatpants. It doesn't matter what I show up in, but there will be people who will 100% she me all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and there will be people who will he me, but even sometimes they'll stutter. Then the other folks you have that will say they, and I'm like every time I introduce myself, I use he or she pronouns. I don't use they, and they will they me every time.
Yep.
So that's always been, and I try to let that go. I try to like not make it a big deal, but it does bother me when people don't even try. When you just don't even try. When you they me, you're just not even
You
trying
gave
at
up.
this
You
point.
gave up.
You gave up, and you saw how I looked one day, and you're just like, we're just gonna go with this so I don't mess up, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
don't feel bad about it. In terms of just like existing, like I just kind of exist and do my own thing. Like I don't know, and I said this to somebody the other week. I don't know what opportunities I'm not getting because I'm non-binary,
Mm-hmm.
or because I'm black, or because of whatever else other identities that I had that day. I don't know what I'm missing because of that, but I am grateful that people find me
Mm-hmm.
and they're like, "Hey, I don't know anybody else who looks like you or who else exists or whatever. I would like to talk to you." Um, that's kind of why I stay in academia. I call academia like my kink,
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like we're in a very, I feel like we're in a very like I like being punished and I'm here. So it's just like, I'm here. You don't love me, but I love you, but we're going to keep making this work. So it's a very, like, very, very, very
That is a
consensual.
great way to describe it. To be quite frank, that's a great way to describe it.
We're battling, but
Mm-hmm.
I try to stick in academic spaces because people find me that way, and there are still Black queer academics who exist. So I understand the like people leaving academia because they're like it's not supportive of queer folks, but I'm also just like, and queer folks are here, and if we all go, then who's going to be around?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, long story short, like I just try to show up in the
Yeah.
way that I show up, and hopefully people who need to find me. But especially my white colleagues, they have a hard time. My Black colleagues have a hard time too. Shout out to them, but I love them.
Mm-hmm.
But they also, and it's, and maybe this is a whole other topic, but it's also different with Black folks, where it's just like there are some Black folks that I know who can she me and girl me, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
fine with that
Yep.
because community or culture wise, like I'm cool with that.
Yep.
Don't she me or girl me if you don't know me like that. Like that's
No.
not, no, we're not doing that. Like I
No.
gave you the pronouns, use these,
Mm-hmm.
but if you like a home girl, if you are my homeboy, whoever you are, and you she or girl me, that's because we have a relationship that require,
Yes.
and the she girl doesn't come from a woman, right? It comes
No.
from the standpoint of like, that there is a certain part of me that does not reflect that, but you're
Mm-hmm.
calling me that in terms of like familial
Mm-hmm.
or like we're cool, whatever. But yeah, that's always, I feel like it's different, and maybe that's like I said, a whole other conversation. But depending on race, like
Yeah.
relationship, any of that, like the pronouns can be fluid, but not for everybody.
Wholeheartedly agree. Follow-up question. Does it feel, when people misgender you and use the wrong set of pronouns, does it feel more grungy, gross, aggressive, whatever word you want to use, depending on the race of the person? I have an answer for that, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Hmm. Where's the situation? Am I at work?
It could be work, it could be with chosen family, it could be out and about, it could be anywhere.
Ooh, at work. At work, I prefer for you to use the ones I gave you
Mm-hmm.
because they're there. They're
Mm-hmm.
in the Zoom, right? They're right there. So I would prefer for you to at least try
Yes.
to start off.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Less points, but I'll give you points if you say they, because at least like you're seeing that something's happening, right?
Okay.
There's something's happening in the face.
Mm-hmm.
There's a queer essence that's going
Mm-hmm.
on. I'm gonna use that. But once you keep doing it, I have to think on that because it depends on where it's coming from.
Yeah.
Like, and I will say, like with Black folks, like that is for me as a Black person. There's an intuition part about pronouns that I
Mm-hmm.
don't think gets talked about, where it's just like, if you are coming to me and you are calling me he, there's something that I can feel where you actually see me as such.
Mm-hmm.
When you're calling me she, but you're doing it in a way because you're being lazy about it, there's something in me that feels like you're doing it on purpose and you're
Yeah.
not respecting me. Sometimes I feel like after you do they, after I told you not to do they, like you're being lazy. So I
Mm-hmm.
think it depends, because when I feel like sometimes when white people at work misgender me or call me she, it's out of like laziness.
Yeah.
I feel like when sometimes Black folks do it, yes, there's laziness, and it depends on the context. That's hard. I don't know. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
because I'm giving grace toward Black folks, but I'm also just like, there are some Black women that can call me she.
Mm-hmm.
There are some Black men that can call me sis.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but I'm not sis or she, particularly with white folks.
Yeah.
It's familial. Outside of that, I don't have too many expectations because I feel like even outside of work, people will stumble, but I appreciate the stumble because then you're going off of your intuition on what to call me, and
Mm-hmm.
you can't see the Zoom, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you're going off of your intuition on how to talk, how to refer to me, or how you feel about me. So I'm a little bit more open to that. But if sometimes people are saying girl and she, and I can feel that it's disrespectful. So yeah,
Yes.
I have to ruminate on that. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So similarly, I do also appreciate the stumble because it's that recognition of like something is not connecting to a societal norm here. I don't know what it is, but I know that it is. I don't know what, but I know that it exists. So I do appreciate the stumble as well. I think in order to protect my health and my mental health specifically at work, I just am like I introduce myself with they them pronouns. It's in my Zoom, it's in my WebEx, it's in whatever system you want to use, it's in my email, like it's on our website. It's literally everywhere. Like you have ample opportunities to be informed of what set of pronouns I use, and now you're just choosing not to. So whatever. There's nothing that I can do about that. For me, similarly, there is a cultural element. I just think Black people use gender neutral language for everybody and without having to think about it too hard. But when you bring attention to the fact that you prefer it, that's where the hesitation comes from. Because I've been growing up using sis, bruh, my dog, my dude, girl for everybody. And then I got to a point where I was like, no, I actually like that you all use this in with my chosen family, friends, whoever it is. I like that you use this range of language for me. And then it's like, oh shoot, I don't know what to do now. I'm like, nothing different. You've been doing what I've been asking you to do. Now, similarly, I do have friends in particular who, if I get a phone call and it's just like, girl, I'm like, okay, we about to get into something. And that's okay though. But these are friends I have known 5, 10, 15, 20 plus years. So like they have that relationship built. And I know that they know and use my pronouns or they, them. They know and acknowledge and affirm the fact that I'm non-binary. And it was just we were having a homie moment. And in that homie moment, that was the language they chose to use. And similarly, I will also get the, bruh, let me tell you what happened today. That's one of my favorite ones. I love bruh.
I like bruh.
Bruh was one of my favorite ones. That was actually like when I was church trying to figure out my pronouns. That was actually like what I used. I was like, just call me bruh, please, because like that felt just the most. And I gotta give out a shout out to Jasmine Prince, who was my graduate student at the time I was an undergrad. And eventually when I, invited her into my lived experience and told her what was going on, she was like, I knew something was up from that bruh in that meeting that one time, but I was just waiting for you, to figure it out as we got there. So shout out to Jasmine. She was an early supporter and I'm grateful. But yeah, like bruh's one of my favorite ones. And I just think we have a range of language that we use anyway. Like just use it all.
Use it all. And I like when, and this is why I'm not too like, I'm more, what are you gonna call me? Like I'm more like, let choose your own adventure. So like when people call me bruh, I'm like, what did you feel or see that allows you to think that you can call me bruh? Because I like it. Do
yes, more. I'm here for it.
My clients do that. Like some of my clients, they'll call me bruh, and I'm like, okay.
Thank you.
Like this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Some of my friends. So it's just like, and a lot of my queer male friends will call me bruh, which I appreciate. But then some of them will call me sis, and I like that too because it's, again, I know that that's not coming from the essence of you thinking that I'm a woman, but you are coming from a familial sense. So yeah, bruh doesn't get introduced by me, but I like when people introduce it for me, and I'm like, okay, I like this.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes.